The endless chase, the illusion of fulfillment. There's a strange silence in the world, one that hides beneath the noise. Every morning, millions wake up and immediately begin running, not physically, but psychologically. They run toward goals, ideals, fantasies, chasing a version of themselves that always seems to be one step ahead. We chase money, recognition, validation, affection, beauty, followers, perfection, and we call it ambition. But what if it's something else? What if this constant chase isn't a mark of progress, but a symptom of quiet desperation? Modern life has disguised this desperation with elegant names: self-improvement, hustle culture, personal branding. Yet beneath those labels lies the same human anxiety that has haunted us for centuries. The fear of being nothing. We tell ourselves, once I achieve this, I'll finally feel complete. But the moment we get there, the satisfaction fades, replaced by the next goal, the next target, the next illusion. It's a cycle so familiar, so normalized, that most never question it. We've built entire civilizations around this restless energy, empires powered by endless wanting. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill, the tendency of humans to quickly return to a baseline level of happiness, no matter what they achieve or acquire. You get the promotion, the car, the relationship, and for a moment it feels euphoric. But soon your mind adapts, the dopamine fades, and the chase begins again. It's not that we're broken, it's that the system we live in depends on us never feeling whole. The global economy is fueled not by our fulfillment, but by our perpetual dissatisfaction. Every advertisement, every influencer post, every success story whispers the same quiet message: you are not enough yet. And so we run faster, we scroll longer, we compare more. Social media has turned comparison into a 24-hour sport. Everyone is performing happiness, achievement, and purpose, creating an endless mirror maze of illusion. The result is a collective anxiety, a constant feeling of falling behind in a race no one remembers signing up for. But here's the paradox. The more we chase happiness, the more it slips away. The more we chase love, the lonelier we feel. The more we chase success, the emptier our victories become. It's as if the very act of wanting something intensely pushes it further out of reach. Not because the world is cruel, but because chasing keeps us oriented toward lack. You cannot reach fulfillment while your focus is anchored in absence. Every pursuit contains an invisible belief: I do not have this. And that belief, subtle, silent, yet powerful, becomes the wall separating us from what we seek. This is the tragedy of modern existence. Not that we fail to achieve our dreams, but that we are conditioned to believe we are incomplete until we do. And yet, if you pause, truly pause, something begins to shift. You notice the madness of the chase, the exhaustion in the eyes of people rushing nowhere. You begin to question, what if the peace I'm searching for isn't ahead of me, but behind the constant movement? This first realization is unsettling. It feels like betrayal, like turning your back on everything you've been taught. But it's also the beginning of freedom, because the moment you start to see the chase for what it is, an illusion, a trap, a psychological mirage, you take your first step off the treadmill. The psychology of wanting, how desire controls the mind. Desire, it is both our greatest motivator and our deepest curse. It builds civilizations, fuels art, drives discovery, and yet it quietly enslaves the human mind. Every thought you have, every goal you chase, every action you take, somewhere beneath it lies desire, a subtle whisper that says, if only I had this, then I'd finally be okay. But what if that whisper isn't leading you toward freedom, but away from it? Modern psychology reveals a profound truth. We are not addicted to achieving, we are addicted to wanting. The pleasure we feel doesn't come from obtaining, but from anticipating. Dopamine, the brain's chemical of motivation, spikes not when we receive a reward, but when we believe it's coming. It's the anticipation, the tension, the chase itself that intoxicates us. That's why the thrill fades the moment we get what we wanted. The brain moves on, restless, scanning for the next desire to fixate on. This is how desire sustains itself, by ensuring there's always a next. Philosophers have warned us about this for centuries. Arthur Schopenhauer described human existence as being trapped in a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. Pain, when we desire what we don't have. Boredom, when we finally get it. Life becomes an endless oscillation between craving and emptiness, a self-perpetuating hunger that can never be fully satisfied. Even Freud, in his theory of the unconscious, saw desire as the core of our psyche, an energy we try to repress, redirect, or rationalize, but never truly escape. And long before them, the Buddha pointed to tanha, or craving, as the root of all human suffering. Desire, then, isn't merely a psychological process. It's a prison of perception. It defines the world not as it is, but as it lacks. Every advertisement we see, every story we consume, reinforces this bias. You are missing something, and this will complete you. The beauty industry sells us self-worth. The fitness industry sells us acceptance. The financial system sells us freedom. But the more we buy, the emptier we become, because what they're really selling isn't satisfaction, it's hope. And hope, when bound to desire, is just another form of control. You see, desire is not just internal. It's manufactured, cultivated, weaponized. Entire economies depend on our inability to sit still in contentment. If you were truly at peace with what you had, the system would collapse. So it keeps you running, feeding you just enough dopamine to keep the chase alive. We think we're chasing freedom, but in truth, we're chasing the illusion of escape, because as long as you're chasing, you're still trapped. The deeper irony is that the object of desire, whatever it may be, isn't what we actually want. What we seek is the feeling we think it will bring: safety, love, recognition, peace. But these are not external possessions, they are internal states of being. This is the cruel genius of the human mind. It mistakes symbols for essence. It believes fulfillment lives in objects, achievements, or other people, when in reality, it lives in perception, in how we relate to the present moment. And until we see through that illusion, we remain at the mercy of the chase, believing that one more step, one more win, one more desire fulfilled will finally set us free. But freedom doesn't begin when you get what you want. It begins the moment you understand why you wanted it. The turning point, when control becomes chaos. There comes a point in every pursuit where the momentum turns against us, when what once felt like progress begins to feel like suffocation. It's that quiet, unbearable realization that no matter how much we control, plan, or achieve, something inside still trembles. At first, control feels empowering. It gives us structure, direction, purpose. We control our image, our routines, our careers, our relationships, believing that mastery over life means mastery over happiness. But control is a fragile illusion. The tighter we hold on, the more things begin to slip through our fingers. Psychologists describe this as is the paradox of control. The more we try to control reality, the more unpredictable it becomes. We micromanage our paths, fearing uncertainty, yet it's that very fear that breeds chaos. What we resist persists. History is filled with empires that collapsed under their own desire for domination, systems that believed they could engineer perfection only to implode from the weight of their own rigidity. But this isn't just the story of nations, it's the story of every individual who tried to outrun their own mind. Think of the artist who pushes so hard to create that inspiration itself dries up, the lover who tries so desperately to keep someone that they drive them away, the ambitious worker who clings so tightly to success that burnout becomes inevitable. In each case, control transforms from a source of order into a source of chaos, because control, at its root, is fear disguised as discipline. The fear of losing what we love, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of being powerless. And fear has a strange way of creating the very outcomes we dread. The person afraid of rejection becomes anxious and withdrawn, ensuring rejection. The perfectionist who fears failure procrastinates, ensuring failure. The one who fears loss clings so tightly that love suffocates. This is where the chase begins to devour itself. The endless striving becomes self-destructive, a storm fueled by its own wind. Eventually it collapses inward, leaving behind exhaustion, confusion, and despair. Philosophers and mystics often call this the breaking point of the ego, a necessary collapse of the illusion of control. It's the moment when the identity you've built around striving begins to crack, when you realize that your effort, your plans, your control have not delivered peace, only noise. It feels like failure, but it's not. It's the beginning of awakening. Because chaos is often the first sign that the old structure is dying. The self that needed to chase, that believed peace was conditional, is dissolving. And as painful as that process is, it's also sacred. It's the death of illusion, the clearing of ground for something real to emerge. In this collapse, a quiet question begins to echo. If controlling, chasing, and striving have failed to bring me peace, what happens if I stop? It's in that question that a door begins to open, the door to something ancient, something counterintuitive, something we were never taught to value. The surrender principle, the paradox of letting go. What if everything we've been taught about success, control, and progress is upside down? What if the real power begins the moment we stop trying to grasp it? This is the paradox at the heart of surrender, the strange, counterintuitive truth that what we fight for most intensely often comes to us only when we stop struggling. From the outside, surrender looks like defeat. We imagine it as giving up, losing ambition, or settling for less. But true surrender isn't about passivity, it's about alignment. It's the point where striving ends and flow begins. In ancient Chinese philosophy, this concept is known as Wu Wei, meaning effortless action. It doesn't mean doing nothing, it means doing only what is essential, moving with the rhythm of life rather than against it. The Taoists compared it to water flowing around rocks, soft yet unstoppable, yielding yet powerful. In modern psychology, we call it flow state, that seamless immersion where action and awareness merge and effort seems to disappear. Artists, athletes, and thinkers describe it as the moment when they stop trying and something greater takes over. Ideas, movements, and solutions arise not from force, but from presence. But the human mind fears surrender. It fears uncertainty, loss, and the collapse of its illusion of control. The ego thrives on striving. It needs problems to solve, mountains to climb, enemies to conquer. To surrender means the ego must step aside, and it resists that with every thought it has. Yet life has a strange intelligence that operates beyond our plans. When we stop forcing, we begin noticing patterns that were invisible before. Subtle alignments, unexpected opportunities, synchronicities. The moment we stop chasing, things begin to find us, not because reality suddenly changes, but because our perception does. You can't see clearly while thrashing in water. Only when you stop struggling does the reflection become visible. Carl Jung called this process shadow integration, accepting what we resist instead of repressing it. The moment we stop fighting fear, it loses its grip. The moment we stop denying pain, healing begins. Surrender isn't about weakness. It's about the courage to see reality without filters. When you let go, the need for constant validation starts to dissolve. You stop chasing love because you begin to feel worthy without it. You stop chasing success because you realize fulfillment isn't earned, it's recognized. You stop chasing meaning because you discover that life, in its simplest state, already is meaningful. Letting go doesn't mean you stop acting. It means you act without attachment to the outcome. You still pursue, but from calmness, not compulsion. You still move forward, but with awareness, not anxiety. The difference between chasing and allowing is internal. In chasing, the mind says, I must make this happen. In allowing, the soul whispers, I'll move with what wants to happen. And it's here that something profound begins to occur. The tension dissolves, creativity returns, peace enters quietly. You begin to notice that the right people, opportunities, and insights start appearing, not because you forced them, but because you stopped resisting the flow that was always trying to guide you. The paradox of surrender is that when you finally stop trying to control life, you regain control in the truest sense, not control over outcomes, but mastery over your inner state. In that stillness, a deeper intelligence takes the lead, and from that place, everything that once seemed so distant begins to move toward you effortlessly, because life was never against you. It was waiting for you to stop standing in its way. The flow of life. When things start coming to you, something begins to shift the moment you let go, not in the outside world at first, but within. The noise softens, the pressure to force outcomes fades, and for the first time, life begins to move with you, not against you. This is the moment when you start to experience what can only be called the flow of life. The natural current that was always there, waiting beneath the surface of all your striving. It's not mystical, it's alignment. When you stop chasing, the frantic energy of lack dissolves, and space is created, mental, emotional, and spiritual space. And into that space, life begins to flow effortlessly. The same opportunities that once seemed distant begin to appear almost mysteriously. Relationships deepen without manipulation. Creative insights emerge without pressure. Solutions rise from silence. You realize that you were never manifesting or attracting anything. You were simply allowing what was always trying to reach you. You were blocking it with fear, control, and overthinking. Think of the moments in life when everything seemed to fall into place. Not because you planned it perfectly, but because you stopped interfering. Maybe it was when you stopped desperately trying to meet someone and suddenly found genuine connection, or when you gave up forcing inspiration and creativity poured out of you effortlessly. This is what psychologists describe as the flow state, the harmonious balance between effort and ease. You are fully engaged but not attached, deeply focused yet internally calm. Neuroscientists have discovered that in these moments the brain's prefrontal cortex, the center of self-criticism and doubt, actually quiets down. You stop overanalyzing, and consciousness expands. Life begins to feel less like a battle and more like a dance. You no longer demand outcomes, you respond to them. You stop trying to manipulate timing, and you start trusting rhythm. You stop pushing, and you start allowing. This doesn't mean surrendering to chaos. It means becoming attuned to a subtler kind of intelligence, one that doesn't rush, that doesn't cling, that doesn't panic. When you enter this state, things begin to come to you, not because of magic, but because your energy no longer repels them. You've stopped chasing, so life no longer has to run from you. Science even offers an explanation. The brain's reticular activating system, which filters information, starts recognizing patterns that match your new inner calm. When you're no longer in a state of fear or desperation, your attention shifts toward what resonates with peace and opportunity. You see doors that were always open but invisible while you were panicking. The mystics call it alignment. Psychologists call it coherence. Flow practitioners call it effortless living. But whatever the name, it feels like home. Because in truth, life was never about forcing things to happen. It was about becoming the kind of person to whom those things naturally happen. When you stop chasing, you stop radiating lack and start embodying wholeness. And from that wholeness, the world rearranges itself around you, not out of obedience, but resonance. It's in this state that you begin to understand the quiet truth of existence. You don't have to run after what's meant for you. You just have to stop running away from it. Society's great trap. Why we're taught to keep running. If letting go brings peace, then why is it so rare? Why does society constantly push us to chase, to hustle, compete, and compare, even when it leaves us hollow? The uncomfortable answer is this: the system depends on your restlessness. The modern world is built on the economics of dissatisfaction. Every advertisement, every trend, every new product exists to remind you that you are missing something. A better phone, a newer car, a younger face, a bigger following. The machinery of capitalism doesn't thrive on fulfillment. It thrives on the illusion of it. Fulfilled people don't consume endlessly. They don't scroll for hours. They don't seek validation in digital applause. A content mind is unprofitable. So the system must keep you chasing. It must convince you that your worth is tied to constant becoming, that who you are is never enough. This isn't a conspiracy of individuals. It's the natural evolution of a system that learned how to monetize the human psyche. The fear of missing out becomes fuel for economic growth. Insecurity becomes the new currency. We live in what sociologists call the attention economy, where your focus, not your money, is the true product. The more distracted you are, the more valuable you become to corporations. Algorithms don't reward peace of mind. They reward engagement, outrage, envy, addiction. The more emotionally unstable you are, the easier you are to predict and therefore to manipulate. This is not new. Throughout history, those in power have learned to control not through chains, but through desire. If you can make people chase illusions, they will never notice who is holding the leash. Ancient empires used religion and fear. Modern ones use advertising and aspiration. illusion. Both rely on the same psychological mechanism to keep people running after something they'll never quite reach. The result is a society addicted to motion but allergic to meaning. We glorify busyness as proof of value. We treat exhaustion as a badge of honor. We measure self-worth in productivity metrics as if existing calmly were a sin. And yet, beneath the constant motion, there's a quiet truth trying to break through, that the chase was never ours to begin with. We inherited it from media, from culture, from the collective trance of consumption. To stop chasing, then, is not just a personal act of peace. It's an act of rebellion. It's saying no to the machinery that profits from your insecurity. It's reclaiming the one thing the world cannot sell you, your stillness. When you stop running, you don't just liberate yourself, you threaten an entire structure built on keeping you restless. That's why stillness feels dangerous in this world, because a person who no longer chases cannot be controlled. And perhaps that's the quiet revolution the world fears most. Not a revolution of violence or politics, but a revolution of consciousness. The return to stillness, reclaiming inner power. After the noise fades, after the endless chase, the collapse, the surrender, what remains is silence. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something deeper. A quiet awareness that doesn't demand, doesn't strive, doesn't seek. It simply is. This stillness isn't laziness or indifference. It's clarity, the ability to see without distortion. When the mind stops running in circles, reality begins to reveal itself as it truly is, not as our fears and desires paint it. You begin to realize that fulfillment was never hidden in the future. It was buried beneath layers of resistance, beneath the belief that something more was always needed. And in that realization, power returns, not the kind that controls, but the kind that understands. True power doesn't come from what you can force. It comes from what you can allow. It comes from the ability to stand in the middle of uncertainty without needing to escape it. It comes from inner calm, the kind that no achievement, relationship, or possession can give or take away. This is the moment when you start living, not reacting, when you stop being driven by unconscious impulses and start acting from awareness. You see through the lies of comparison, the illusions of control, the noise of endless improvement. You no longer chase perfection. You live from wholeness. The philosopher Epictetus wrote that freedom is not the ability to get what you want, but the ability to want only what is within your control. And what is truly within your control? Only your inner state, your perception, your response, your presence. Stillness doesn't mean the world stops testing you. Life continues, unpredictable, imperfect, alive. But you no longer drown in it. You move through it with balance. You learn that peace is not the absence of chaos. It's the space within chaos that remains untouched. This stillness becomes a mirror. It reflects everything without judgment. Pleasure and pain, success and failure, love and loss, and you begin to see that they were never opposites, only movements of the same life force. And from that space, a different kind of action emerges, not driven by fear, but by clarity. You still create, still pursue, still dream, but now it comes from abundance, not lack. You are no longer chasing life, you are participating in it. The return to stillness is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new kind of existence, one where you no longer measure yourself by outcomes, but by alignment, one where peace is not a goal, but a natural state, one where the world no longer pulls you in every direction, because you have remembered where home truly is. within. And in that inner quiet, something extraordinary happens. You begin to realize that nothing was ever missing. It was all here, waiting for you to stop running long enough to see it. The final revelation, the moment, everything starts coming to you. There comes a moment, subtle, almost invisible, when the chase ends completely, not because you gave up, but because you finally see through the illusion that there was ever anything to chase. It feels like standing still after years of running. The noise quiets, the urgency dissolves. The mind, once obsessed with becoming, finally allows itself to be. And in that stillness, something miraculous unfolds. Life begins to move toward you. Opportunities that once required effort now appear naturally. People who resonate with your energy begin to find you. Moments of meaning arise without planning, as if reality itself has been waiting for your permission to flow freely again. This is not coincidence, it's resonance. You no longer attract from fear or lack, but from alignment. You no longer seek because you have become. There is a saying, you don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. When you were chasing, you were radiating absence, communicating to life that something was missing. But when you return to yourself, when you stop grasping and start trusting, you emit a different signal, one of completeness. And life, being the mirror it always was, reflects that completeness back to you. The irony is profound. Everything you wanted was never outside of you. The peace, the connection, the meaning, they were waiting for you to stop running from them, waiting for you to stop believing you had to earn them. This is the essence of awakening, realizing that fulfillment is not a destination, but the ground you've always stood on. You didn't need to chase life. You only needed to stop resisting it. And now, from this stillness, you begin to live differently. You act, but not from fear. You desire, but not from emptiness. You move, but you no longer run, because you've learned that when you stop chasing, you stop separating yourself from what you seek. In this state, everything begins to come to you, not because you conquered the world, but because you came home to yourself. And when that happens, the chase ends forever, not in exhaustion, but in peace, because what you were searching for was never out there. It was always quietly, patiently, waiting within.